Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I should have trusted my instincts when Liam didn't want a video chat before our first date. It seems so obvious now, looking back, but at the time, I was so eager for a connection, any connection, that I readily accepted his excuse about a broken camera. We'd matched on Hinge, and his profile was curated. That's the only way to describe it. Perfect lighting, carefully chosen angles, witty captions that hinted at a deep and sensitive soul. He claimed to be a writer, working on a novel, which appealed to my own creative aspirations. Our text conversations were engaging, intellectual, even a little flirtatious. He seemed genuinely interested in my thoughts and opinions, and he had a way of making me feel seen and understood. We talked about books, movies, music, our families, our dreams for the future. It felt effortless, like we'd known each other for years. So when he suggested meeting for coffee, I was excited. But then came the reluctance about video chatting. "Sorry," he texted. "My camera's busted. Been meaning to get it fixed. Maybe we can just skip straight to the date. I promise I look exactly like my pictures, maybe even better in person." I hesitated. It felt a little strange, but I didn't want to seem demanding or distrustful. Plus, he'd seemed so open and honest in our conversations. I rationalized it, telling myself that some people just aren't comfortable on video. The coffee shop was bustling when I arrived, the air thick with the aroma of roasted beans and the chatter of conversations. I scanned the crowd, trying to spot Liam. He described himself as tall with dark hair and piercing blue eyes. After a few minutes, I saw him. He was even more striking in person than his picture suggested. His eyes really were an intense shade of blue, and he had a charming smile that made my stomach flutter. We talked for hours that day, about everything and nothing. He was funny, intelligent, and attentive. He listened intently to everything I said, making me feel like the most interesting person in the world. There was a palpable chemistry between us, a spark that ignited with every shared laugh and lingering glance. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself completely captivated by him. He walked me back to my apartment, and we stood on the doorstep for a long time, lost in conversation. Before I knew it, he leaned in and kissed me. It was a perfect first kiss, soft and sweet and lingering. I felt a surge of excitement, a giddy sense of possibility. I was already picturing our future together, the adventures we would share, the love we would build. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of dates and romantic gestures. Liam was attentive and thoughtful, always planning elaborate outings and showering me with compliments. He seemed to anticipate my every need, catering to my desires with an almost uncanny precision. I was completely smitten. But beneath the surface of this idyllic romance, subtle cracks began to appear. He was always vague about his writing, deflecting my questions about his progress, and avoiding any discussion of his work. He never invited me to his apartment, always suggesting we meet at my place or out in public. And he became increasingly possessive, demanding to know my whereabouts at all times and expressing jealousy over my friendships. I tried to dismiss these red flags, attributing them to his artistic temperament or his deep affection for me. But the feeling of unease persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. I started to question his stories, to doubt his sincerity. Something just didn't feel right. One evening, while Liam was in the shower at my apartment, I decided to do some investigating. I knew it was a breach of privacy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. I went through his phone, searching for clues. What I found shattered my perception of him completely. His Hinge profile wasn't his. The pictures he'd used were stolen from a fitness model's Instagram account. The witty captions were lifted from various websites and blogs. His entire online persona was a carefully constructed fabrication. I scrolled through his messages, and my blood ran cold. He'd been using the same lines, the same stories, the same tactics on multiple women. He was a con artist, a manipulator, a master of deception. I felt sick to my stomach, betrayed and violated. How could I have been so blind? How could I have fallen for his lies? As I continued to dig, I discovered even more disturbing details. He had a history of stalking and harassing women, and he'd been arrested several times for petty theft and fraud. He was a dangerous individual, and I had let him into my life. I didn't wait for him to get out of the shower. I grabbed my purse and ran out of the apartment, leaving him behind with his lies and his stolen identity. I drove to my best friend's house, sobbing uncontrollably. She listened patiently as I recounted the story, offering comfort and support. We spent the rest of the night piecing together the puzzle, trying to understand how I had been so easily deceived. We realized that Liam had preyed on my vulnerabilities, exploiting my desire for connection and my romantic idealism. He had mirrored my interests and values, creating a false sense of intimacy and trust. The next day, I went to the police and filed a report. They took my accusations seriously, and they launched an investigation. I also contacted the women whose pictures he had stolen, warning them about his fraudulent activities. It took several months, but the police eventually caught up with Liam. He was arrested and charged with multiple counts of fraud, stalking, and identity theft. He pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to several years in prison. The experience left me scarred, emotionally and psychologically. It took me a long time to trust again, to open myself up to the possibility of love. I learned a valuable lesson about the importance of trusting my instincts and being wary of people who seem too good to be true. I still use Hinge, but I'm much more cautious now. I always insist on video chatting before meeting someone in person, and I do thorough background checks on anyone I'm considering dating. I'm no longer willing to compromise my safety or my well-being for the sake of romance. I should have trusted my instincts when Liam didn't want a video chat. It was the first red flag, the first warning sign that something was amiss. But I ignored it, blinded by my desire for connection. I won't make that mistake again. I am grateful that I was able to get out before anything worse happened. I learned that some people are experts in pretending to be someone they aren't. It is up to me to protect myself, no matter how romantic it may seem. I should have trusted my instincts when his profile picture was just a close-up of his eye. Seriously, just one eye, staring intensely into the camera. Now, I know what you're thinking. Artistic, mysterious, edgy. And maybe, on some level, that's what I thought too. I was bored, scrolling through Hinge, and that single, piercing eye stood out from the endless stream of gym selfies and group photos. I'd been on Hinge for a few months, mostly meeting guys who were fine, perfectly pleasant, utterly forgettable. I was looking for something, anything, to break the monotony. Maybe that's why I swiped right on iGuy87. His name was Mark, and his profile, beyond the unsettling eye photo, was sparse. A few vague prompts about his love for exploring the unseen and his unique perspective on life. Red flags? Absolutely. But my curiosity outweighed my common sense. We matched, and his first message was even weirder. The eye sees all. Do you dare to be seen? I rolled my eyes, but I also kind of laughed. It was so over-the-top dramatic that it was almost endearing. I replied, "Only if you promise not to use your eye powers to steal my soul." He responded instantly with, "Souls are overrated. I'm more interested in your story." And so began a week of intense, late-night conversations. Mark was surprisingly articulate and intelligent, albeit in a profoundly strange way. He talked about philosophy, quantum physics, and ancient mythology, weaving them together into elaborate, often incomprehensible theories. He claimed to be a freelance writer, working on a groundbreaking exposé that would reveal the hidden truths of the universe. He wouldn't tell me what the exposé was about, only that it was too dangerous to discuss online. I know. I was basically talking to a talking conspiracy theory. But he was also fascinating. He challenged my assumptions, made me think, and, dare I say it, intrigued me. He was nothing like the predictable, bland guys I usually met on dating apps. I told myself that maybe he was just eccentric, misunderstood. Maybe he was genuinely brilliant, just quirky. We made plans to meet. He insisted on picking me up, which I initially resisted. But he was so insistent, and I was so eager to see if he was as intriguing in person as he was online, that I caved. He gave me his address, a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of the city. I told a friend where I was going and shared Mark's profile, just in case. The night of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I spent hours getting ready, trying to strike the right balance between casual and effortlessly alluring. I second-guessed my outfit, my hair, my makeup. Was I making a mistake? Was I about to walk into a real-life horror movie? He arrived promptly at 7 p.m. He was taller than I expected, with piercing blue eyes that seemed to bore right through me. He wore a long, dark coat and a fedora that cast a shadow over his face. He looked like he'd stepped straight out of a noir film. "Ready to explore the unseen?" he asked, a sly smile playing on his lips. I hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and said, "Let's go." The evening started off oddly normal. He took me to a small, dimly lit Italian restaurant in a quiet part of town. The food was decent, the ambience was intimate, and for a while, I almost forgot how strange he was. He asked me about my life, my work, my dreams. He listened intently, nodding thoughtfully, his eyes never leaving mine. But then, as the evening wore on, the weirdness crept back in. He started talking about the restaurant, claiming that it was a portal to another dimension, and that the waiters were interdimensional beings in disguise. He said that the pasta was made from extraterrestrial algae, and that the wine was infused with cosmic energy. I tried to laugh it off, but he was dead serious. His eyes gleamed with an almost fanatical intensity. I started to feel uncomfortable. I excused myself to go to the bathroom and texted my friend, "This guy is officially bonkers. SOS. When I returned to the table, Mark was staring intently at a salt shaker. "The salt," he said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "It's not what it seems. It's a conduit, a key to unlocking the secrets of the universe." I decided I'd had enough. "Mark," I said, "I think I should go home." He looked up, his eyes widening. "But the night is just beginning," he said. "I want to show you something. Something extraordinary." He insisted on taking me to a secret location that he couldn't reveal. I flat out refused. I said I wanted to go home, and I wanted to go home now. He seemed disappointed, but he didn't argue. He drove me back to my apartment in silence. When we arrived, he parked the car and turned to me, his eyes filled with an unsettling mix of intensity and sadness. "You don't believe me, do you?" he said. "Mark," I said, trying to remain calm, "I think you're a very interesting person, but I also think you might be a little delusional." He shook his head. "You'll see," he said. "One day you'll see. The eye never lies." He leaned in, as if to kiss me, but I quickly opened the car door and got out. "Good night, Mark," I said and hurried inside. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, my heart pounding. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just dodged a bullet. I immediately blocked his number and deleted him from Hinge. I didn't want anything to do with him ever again. But the story doesn't end there. A few days later, I started noticing things. Small things at first. A light flickering in my apartment when I knew I turned it off. A book falling off my shelf for no reason. A strange shadow moving in the corner of my eye. I dismissed them as coincidences, just my imagination running wild. But then the incidents became more frequent, more unsettling. I started hearing whispers in my apartment, faint, unintelligible murmurs that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I felt like I was being watched, constantly, even when I was alone. One night, I woke up to find my bedroom door slightly ajar. I was sure I'd closed it before going to sleep. I got up to close it, and that's when I saw it. Scrawled on my bedroom mirror, in what looked like lipstick, was a single word: "Seen." I screamed. I ran out of my apartment and didn't stop until I reached my friend's place. I spent the night on her couch, terrified to go back. The next day, I went to the police. I told them everything about Mark, about the strange occurrences in my apartment, about the message on the mirror. They took my statement, but they were skeptical. They said there was no evidence of a break-in, no sign of forced entry. They suggested I might be suffering from stress or anxiety. I knew they didn't believe me. I knew they thought I was crazy. But I knew what I'd seen. I knew what I'd experienced. I knew that Mark was somehow involved. I decided to take matters into my own hands. I did some research on Mark, Digging deep into his online history, I discovered that he had a history of mental illness, that he'd been diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. He'd been obsessed with conspiracy theories for years, convinced that he was being watched by a secret organization. I also found a blog that he'd been running under a pseudonym. It was filled with rambling, incoherent posts about the all-seeing eye, the hidden truth, and the coming apocalypse. In one post, he wrote about a woman he'd met on a dating app, a woman who had rejected his vision and refused to see the truth. He vowed to open her eyes, to show her the way. I knew then that I was in danger. I knew that Mark was obsessed with me, that he believed I was somehow blocking him from uncovering some grand cosmic secret. I knew that he wouldn't stop until he'd open my eyes, whatever that meant. I moved out of my apartment that day. I changed my number, deleted my social media accounts, and went into hiding. I stayed with friends, with family, moving from place to place, never staying in one location for more than a few days. I was terrified, constantly looking over my shoulder, convinced that Mark was watching me, waiting for the right moment to strike. I knew he was out there, somewhere, lurking in the shadows. The eye was always watching. It's been years since I met Mark on Hinge. I've tried to move on, to put the experience behind me. But I can't. The fear is always there, lurking beneath the surface. A constant reminder of the night I swiped right on the wrong person. I still use dating apps, but I'm much more cautious now. I scrutinize every profile, every picture, every message. I trust my instincts, even when they tell me something I don't want to hear. And I never, ever swipe right on a profile with just a picture of an eye. I should have trusted my instincts. I used to think those Hinge horror stories were all made up, fabricated for internet clout, or just fueled by bad dates gone slightly sour. You know the type. Exaggerated tales of awkward silences, mismatched expectations, or maybe a guy who wouldn't stop talking about his crypto investments. Harmless stuff, right? Annoying, sure, but nothing truly horrifying. I figured, people go on bad dates. It happens. It's part of the whole dating app experience. Then it happened to me. It started, innocently enough, with a like on my Hinge profile. His name was Alex, and his profile was, well, normal. Maybe even a little boring. Which, honestly, was a relief. No shirtless gym selfies, no try-hard travel pics, just a few decent photos of him smiling, one with a dog, always a plus, right? And a short bio about enjoying hiking and craft beer. He seemed like a safe bet, a nice, average guy looking for a connection. We matched, we chatted, and the conversation flowed easily. He asked about my interests, my job, my favorite hiking trails. Nothing out of the ordinary. We had a few things in common, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet up for a hike. I hesitated for a second, but then I figured, why not? It was a public place, broad daylight, and I could always make an excuse to leave if things got weird. We met at the trailhead on a Saturday morning. Alex looked just like his pictures, maybe a little taller. He was wearing hiking boots and a backpack, and he had a friendly, open face. The hike itself was pleasant. The weather was perfect, the scenery was beautiful, and Alex was easy to talk to. We chatted about everything and nothing as we walked, and I started to think that maybe, just maybe, I had actually found a decent guy on Hinge. But then things started to get off. It started subtly. He began asking more personal questions, things that felt a little too intimate for a first date. He asked about my past relationships, my family dynamics, my deepest fears. I brushed it off at first, chalking it up to him being open and honest. But the questions kept coming, and they became increasingly probing. Then he started making comments about my appearance. Not overtly creepy or offensive, but strange. He'd say things like, "You have such a captivating gaze," or "Your hair is the color of autumn leaves." It was like he was trying too hard to be poetic, and it made me feel uncomfortable. As we hiked deeper into the woods, I noticed that he kept glancing around, like he was looking for something, or someone. He'd stop suddenly, his eyes darting back and forth, and then he'd start walking again, without saying a word. The trail we were on started to narrow, and the trees closed in around us. I began to feel a growing sense of unease. I had a sinking feeling that I was in a bad situation. I quickened my pace, hoping to reach the end of the trail and get back to the parking lot. That's when he stopped me. He grabbed my arm, not roughly, but firmly enough to stop me in my tracks. "I need to show you something," he said, his voice low and serious. My heart started pounding. I tried to pull my arm away, but he held on tight. "What is it?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer. Instead, he started leading me off the trail, into the dense undergrowth. I resisted, but he was stronger than me, and he kept pulling me forward. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice rising in panic. "Just a little further," he said, his eyes fixed on something in the distance. We pushed through the thick brush, stumbling over roots and fallen branches. The trees were so dense that the sunlight barely reached the forest floor. It was dark and damp and eerily silent. Finally, we reached a small clearing. In the center of the clearing was a large, ancient-looking tree. Its branches were gnarled and twisted, and its trunk was covered in moss and lichen. "This is it," Alex said, his voice almost reverent. "This is what?" I asked, my mind racing. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small wooden box. He opened the box and took out a knife. My blood ran cold. "What are you doing?" I stammered, backing away from him. He didn't answer. He walked over to the tree and began carving something into the bark. I couldn't see what he was writing, but I could hear the sound of the knife scraping against the wood. I knew I had to get out of there. I turned and ran, back the way we had come. I didn't look back. I just ran as fast as I could. I could hear him behind me, calling my name, but I didn't stop. I ran until I reached the trail, and then I ran all the way back to the parking lot. I jumped into my car, locked the doors, and drove away as fast as I could. I didn't stop until I was miles away from the trailhead. I spent the next few days in a state of shock. I couldn't believe what had happened. I kept replaying the events in my mind, trying to make sense of it all. I reported Alex to Hinge, but they said there was nothing they could do without proof of any criminal activity. I considered going to the police, but I didn't have any evidence. It was just my word against his. I deleted Hinge and swore off dating apps for good. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something terrible. A few weeks later, I was scrolling through the local news website when I saw a headline that made my blood run cold. "Missing woman found dead in woods." The article described how a young woman had gone missing while hiking in the same area where I had met Alex. Her body had been found near an ancient tree, with strange symbols carved into its bark. The police were investigating, but they had no suspects. I knew, without a doubt, that Alex was responsible. I went to the police and told them everything. I showed them his Hinge profile, described our date, and told them about the knife and the carving. They took my statement seriously and launched an investigation. It turned out that Alex had a history of stalking and harassment. He had been obsessed with several women in the past, and he had a fascination with ancient rituals and symbols. The police tracked Alex down and arrested him. They found the wooden box and the knife in his apartment. The knife had traces of the missing woman's blood on it. Alex was charged with murder and eventually convicted. He was sentenced to life in prison. I testified at his trial. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, but I knew I had to do it, for the woman who had lost her life, and for all the other women who might have been his victims. After the trial, I try to put the whole experience behind me, but it's not something you can easily forget. I still have nightmares about that day in the woods, about the ancient tree, and about the man who almost took my life. I used to think those Hinge horror stories were made up. Now I know that they're not. Sometimes, the people you meet online are not who they seem to be. Sometimes, they're hiding something sinister. And sometimes, you're lucky enough to escape with your life. To this day, I still get chills thinking about Jake. It wasn't the kind of chills you get from a scary movie, a fleeting jump scare. These were the deep, bone-rattling chills that come from realizing you've narrowly dodged something truly, profoundly wrong. I met Jake on Hinge. I know. Dating apps are a dime a dozen, but Hinge always felt a little classier somehow. Less about the hookups, more about the designed-to-be-deleted mantra. I was in my late 20s, tired of the bar scene, and genuinely looking for something more than just a casual fling. His profile was appealing. He had that boy next door look, sandy blonde hair, blue eyes that crinkled at the corners, a friendly smile. His prompts were witty and self-deprecating. He said he was a software engineer, loved hiking, and was looking for someone to share his passion for obscure documentaries. Red flags, 0. I swiped right. We matched almost instantly, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He wasn't overly aggressive or cheesy. He was genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about our families, our hobbies, our dreams for the future. He seemed normal, refreshingly so. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet for coffee. He suggested a small cafe near my apartment, which I appreciated. It felt safe and convenient. The date itself was fine. He was a little quieter in person than he was online, but still polite and engaging. We talked about our jobs, the local hiking trails, and even debated the merits of pineapple on pizza. I'm pro. He was vehemently against. There wasn't any immediate spark, no overwhelming chemistry, but there was a comfortable ease between us. At the end of the date, he walked me back to my apartment. We stood on the sidewalk for a moment, an awkward silence hanging in the air. He didn't try to kiss me or pressure me in any way. He simply said he had a nice time and would like to see me again. I agreed, giving him my number. I didn't feel particularly excited, but I also didn't feel any reason to say no. We texted a bit over the next few days, making plans for a second date. He suggested a hike in the nearby state park, which I thought was a great idea. I love being outdoors, and it seemed like a good way to get to know each other better. The hike was scheduled for Saturday morning. That's when things started to get strange. On Friday evening, I received a text from an unknown number. It was a picture of me. Specifically, a picture of me sitting on my couch, watching TV. The picture was taken from outside my window, through the glass. I froze. My heart leaped into my throat. How? Who? My mind raced, trying to make sense of it. I immediately checked all the windows and doors in my apartment, making sure they were locked. I peeked through the blinds, scanning the street for any suspicious activity. Nothing. Just the usual Friday night bustle. I showed the picture to my roommate, Sarah. Her eyes widened in horror. "That's creepy," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Did you call the police?" I hesitated. I didn't want to overreact. Maybe it was just a prank, a twisted joke. But the feeling of being watched, of being violated, was overwhelming. I decided to wait, to see if anything else happened. I didn't sleep well that night. Every creak of the apartment building, every passing car, sent shivers down my spine. I kept replaying the picture in my mind, trying to figure out how someone could have taken it without me noticing. Saturday morning arrived, and I was still shaken from the previous night. I debated canceling the hike with Jake, but I didn't want to seem paranoid or let fear control my life. I told myself that the picture was probably just a random occurrence, a coincidence. I met Jake at the trailhead as planned. He seemed genuinely happy to see me, his blue eyes sparkling in the morning sun. We started hiking, chatting about the weather, the scenery, anything to avoid the unsettling thoughts that were swirling in my head. About an hour into the hike, Jake stopped abruptly. He turned to me, his expression serious. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice low. My stomach clenched. I knew this wasn't going to be good. "I know about the picture," he said, his eyes fixed on mine. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. How could he possibly know about the picture? I hadn't told anyone except Sarah. What are you talking about?" I stammered, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. "The picture of you in your apartment," he said, his voice growing softer. "The one taken from outside your window." I stared at him, speechless, my mind reeling. "How do you know about that?" I finally managed to ask, my voice barely a whisper. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached into his backpack and pulled out something small and metallic. It was a camera lens, a high-powered telephoto lens. I wanted to impress you," he said, his voice trembling. "I wanted you to know how much I cared." The blood drained from my face. It all clicked into place. The low-lit pictures on his Hinge profile, the abandoned train station, the bus stop at night, the questions about my living situation, my schedule, my routines. He wasn't just interested, he was obsessed. I started backing away, my heart pounding in my chest. "Stay away from me," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm calling the police." He lunged forward, grabbing my arm. "Please, just listen," he pleaded, his grip tightening. "I would never hurt you. I just wanted you to see how much I love you." I screamed, pulling away from his grasp. I ran. I ran as fast as I could, stumbling through the woods, my lungs burning, my legs aching. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps pounding on the trail. I didn't dare look back. I kept running until I reached the parking lot, where I collapsed, gasping for breath. I fumbled for my phone, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial 911. The police arrived quickly, sirens blaring. They apprehended Jake without incident. He didn't resist arrest. He just stood there, his eyes empty, a vacant smile on his face. The investigation revealed that Jake had a history of stalking and harassment. He had been obsessed with several women in the past, following them, photographing them, and sending them unwanted messages. He had never physically harmed anyone, but his behavior was clearly escalating. He was charged with stalking and harassment and eventually sentenced to several years in prison. I changed my phone number, deleted all my social media accounts, and moved to a different city. I still have nightmares about Jake, about his vacant eyes and his twisted obsession. I still get chills thinking about how easily I could have become another victim, another statistic. I'm more cautious now, more aware of my surroundings. I'm hesitant to trust people, especially those I meet online. I still use dating apps, but I'm much more careful about who I match with and what information I share. I learned a valuable lesson that day in the woods. A lesson about the dangers of online dating, the importance of trusting your instincts, and the reality that sometimes the most terrifying monsters are the ones who look just like the boy next door. It serves as a constant reminder that even in the seemingly safe and curated world of online dating, there's a darkness that can lurk just beneath the surface, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Now, I triple-check everyone before meeting, but the world is not black and white. Some profiles seem real but are made for fake people, so I decided to take a break for a long time. I wish I could scrub the whole thing from my memory, bleach it out like a stain on a white shirt. The worst part is, it started so normally. I mean, that's the whole problem with dating apps, right? The banality of it all. The endless swiping, the predictable opening lines, the same recycled jokes. You get lulled into this false sense of security, thinking you've seen it all, that nothing can really surprise you anymore. And then something does. It was a Tuesday afternoon. I remember that distinctly. I was procrastinating on a work project, scrolling through Hinge like it was my job. I'd been on the app for a few months, mostly going on underwhelming dates that ended with polite goodbyes and a mutual agreement to never speak again. I wasn't necessarily looking for anything serious, just someone interesting, someone who could hold a conversation without resorting to tired pickup lines. Then I saw him, Liam. His profile was different, not in a flashy, try-hard kind of way, but in a quiet, intriguing one. His pictures weren't overly posed or filtered. One was a candid shot of him laughing with friends at a concert. Another was a close-up of his hands holding a worn copy of some obscure book. His bio was short and sweet, looking for someone to explore hidden corners of the city with. I liked his profile, and to my surprise, he liked me back almost immediately. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He wasn't pushy or overly complimentary, just genuinely curious and engaging. We talked about music, books, art, our favorite hole-in-the-wall restaurants. He seemed intelligent, witty, and genuinely kind. Basically, everything I was looking for. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet up. He suggested this little speakeasy in the East Village, a place I'd never heard of but always wanted to try. It seemed like the perfect first date spot, intimate, atmospheric, and slightly off the beaten path. I remember being nervous as I got ready that night. I spent way too long agonizing over what to wear, finally settling on a simple black dress and a pair of boots. I wanted to look good, but not like I was trying too hard. I even made my friend Sarah take like 20 pictures so I could send it to my sister in London for her to check my outfit. I wanted to be my best, authentic self. As I walked to the subway, I kept replaying our conversations in my head, trying to anticipate what we would talk about. I was genuinely excited, something I hadn't felt in a long time. The speakeasy was exactly as he described, hidden and atmospheric. You had to enter through a nondescript door in an alleyway and then walked down a dimly lit staircase to reach the bar. The interior was cozy and intimate, with exposed brick walls, vintage furniture, and flickering candlelight. Liam was already there when I arrived, waiting for me at a small table in the corner. He stood up as I approached, a warm smile on his face. He looked even better in person than he did in his pictures. He was tall and slender, with kind eyes and a charmingly crooked smile. The date started off perfectly. We ordered drinks, and the conversation flowed just as easily as it had online. We talked about everything and nothing, laughing and joking like we'd known each other for years. He was attentive, engaging, and genuinely interested in what I had to say. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could truly be myself. As the night went on, we started to get a little deeper. We talked about our families, our dreams, our fears. He told me about his struggles with anxiety and his passion for photography. I told him about my difficult childhood and my aspirations to become a writer. It felt like we were building a real connection, a genuine bond. That's when things started to get weird. He started asking me increasingly personal questions, things that felt a little too intimate for a first date. He asked about my past relationships, my insecurities, my biggest regrets. I tried to deflect, to steer the conversation in a different direction, but he was persistent. He kept digging, probing, like he was trying to unearth something hidden beneath the surface. Then he started talking about his own past, but in a way that felt off. He told me about a troubled childhood, a difficult relationship with his parents, and a string of failed romances. But as he spoke, his voice grew colder, his eyes darker. He started to sound less like he was sharing his story and more like he was reciting a script. He told me about how misunderstood he was, how everyone always abandoned him. He said that they were always going to be on his side, but they would leave him as quickly as they come. He described his ex-girlfriend as being selfish and mean, saying he didn't do anything wrong, and she was crazy. He said he gave her everything, but she was never grateful, always taking advantage of him. He went on and on about how she destroyed his life. I started to feel uncomfortable, a knot forming in my stomach. Something about his demeanor felt wrong, unsettling. I tried to excuse myself to go to the restroom, but he grabbed my hand, his grip surprisingly tight. "Don't leave me," he said, his voice low and urgent. "I need you to understand." I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. His eyes were fixed on mine, and they were filled with a strange intensity that made me feel like I was trapped, pinned in place by his gaze. He continued talking, his voice growing louder, more frantic. He started to ramble, jumping from topic to topic, his words becoming increasingly disjointed and nonsensical. He spoke about conspiracy theories, secret societies, and government surveillance. He claimed that he was being watched, that he was being followed, that he was in danger. He then said, "If you break my heart too, I don't know what I'll do." I was terrified. I didn't know what to do, how to get away. I tried to remain calm, to reason with him, but it was no use. He was lost in his own world, completely detached from reality. Finally, I managed to pry my hand away from his grip and stand up. "I have to go," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm not feeling well." He looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and anger. "You're leaving me?" he said, his voice cracking, just like everyone else. I didn't say anything. I just turned and walked away as quickly as I could, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't stop until I was out of the speakeasy and back on the street, gasping for breath in the cold night air. I called a cab and went straight home, locking myself in my apartment and refusing to answer the phone. I spent the rest of the night huddled in my bed, shaking and crying, replaying the events of the evening in my head. The next day, I blocked Liam on Hinge and all other social media platforms. I wanted to erase him from my life, to pretend that the whole thing never happened. But the memory of that night continued to haunt me, lingering in the back of my mind like a dark shadow. For weeks, I was afraid to leave my apartment. I was convinced that he was watching me, that he was waiting for me to come out. I started seeing him everywhere I went, in the subway, on the street, even in my own apartment. But it was never really him, just my imagination playing tricks on me. Eventually, the fear subsided, but the unease remained. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had narrowly escaped something terrible, that I had been face to face with something truly dark and dangerous. To this day, I still think about Liam. I wonder what happened to him, where he is now. I wonder if he's still out there, preying on unsuspecting women on dating apps. I'll never know for sure. But one thing I do know is that I'll never be the same after that night. I'm more cautious now, more guarded, more aware of the potential dangers that lurk beneath the surface of seemingly normal people. I still use dating apps, but I'm much more selective about who I match with. I do more research, ask more questions, and trust my instincts more than ever before. Because you never really know who's on the other side of that screen, what demons they're hiding behind their carefully curated profile. And sometimes, the scariest monsters are the ones who seem the most normal. The one who you didn't expect to be that way. The one that seemed so normal and easy to talk to. The one that seemed as though they could be someone you could spend your life with. Those are the things you should never expect. The dating game is a hard thing to do, and I learned to stay away from the dangers of putting yourself out there. Okay, so I'm going to tell you something that still makes my skin crawl, even though it happened a couple of years ago. It's a Hinge story, but not the kind you share laughing over brunch with your friends. It's the kind that makes you question your judgment and the safety of online dating in general. I'm putting it out there because if it happened to me, it could happen to anyone, and maybe my experience can help someone else avoid a similar nightmare. I was in my late 20s, single, and tired of the bar scene. Hinge seemed like the classier dating app, you know? The whole designed to be deleted marketing spiel got me. I filled out my profile honestly, put up some decent pictures, and started swiping. Most of it was the usual dating app fare. Awkward chats, ghosting, the occasional okay date that went nowhere. Then I matched with Daniel. His profile was pretty standard. A couple of smiling photos, one with a dog, another hiking. His bio mentioned a love for books and craft beer. Nothing immediately screamed psycho. Our initial conversations were easy, engaging. He seemed intelligent, funny, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about our jobs, our families, our hobbies. We even bonded over our shared love of a specific obscure author. Looking back, that might have been when he reeled me in for good. After about a week of chatting, we decided to meet for coffee. The date went well. He was just as charming and witty in person as he was online. We talked for hours, and I felt a real connection. He walked me back to my apartment, and we shared a goodnight kiss. Nothing over the top, just a nice, normal end to a pleasant date. We went out a few more times over the next few weeks. Movies, dinner, walks in the park. He always paid. He always opened doors. He always made sure I got home safe. He was the perfect gentleman. I started to let my guard down, to actually believe that maybe, just maybe, I had found someone special. That's when the little things started. Subtle shifts in his behavior that I initially brushed off as quirks. He started texting me constantly, throughout the day. It was sweet at first, but then it became excessive. If I didn't respond within a few minutes, he'd send another text, then another, asking if I was okay, if I was mad at him, if I was ignoring him. He also started getting jealous. If I mentioned hanging out with friends, especially male friends, he'd get quiet and withdrawn. He'd ask probing questions, wanting to know every detail of the interaction. It was like he was trying to control who I spent my time with. I tried to talk to him about it, to gently explain that I needed some space and that his jealousy was making me uncomfortable. He apologized profusely, promised to do better, and for a few days, he actually did. But then the cycle would start again. The possessiveness escalated. He started showing up at my apartment unannounced, just to say hi. He'd call me late at night, wanting to know what I was doing, who I was with. He even started questioning my outfits, suggesting that some of my clothes were too revealing. I was starting to feel trapped, suffocated. The charming, witty guy I had met on Hinge was slowly morphing into someone controlling and insecure. I knew I needed to end things, but I was scared. I was starting to see glimpses of anger in him, a simmering rage that he barely kept under control. One evening, after I told him I couldn't see him because I was going out with a girlfriend, he showed up at the restaurant. He sat at the bar, glaring at me and my friend the entire night. It was incredibly awkward and uncomfortable. I tried to ignore him, but I could feel his eyes burning into me. When I finally left, he followed me out. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "Why are you doing this to me?" he hissed. his face contorted with anger. "Why are you trying to hurt me?" I pulled away, terrified. "You're hurting me, Daniel," I said, my voice shaking. "I can't do this anymore. It's over." He didn't say anything. He just stared at me, his eyes filled with a chilling emptiness. I turned and ran, not stopping until I was safely inside my apartment. I blocked him on my phone, on social media, on everything. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The next day, I started getting emails from an anonymous account. They were disturbing, threatening. They contained details about my life that only Daniel could have known. My address, my daily routine, even things I had told him in confidence. The emails escalated. They became more graphic, more violent. He threatened to ruin my career, to hurt my family, to make my life a living hell. I was terrified. I went to the police, but they said there was nothing they could do unless he actually physically harmed me. They told me to document everything and to get a restraining order if necessary. I felt helpless, vulnerable. I was living in constant fear, jumping at every sound, afraid to leave my apartment. I installed security cameras, changed my locks, and started carrying pepper spray. One night, I woke up to a strange noise outside my window. I peeked through the curtains and saw him standing there, in the shadows, staring up at my apartment. He was just standing there, motionless, like a silent predator waiting for its prey. I called the police again, but by the time they arrived, he was gone. They searched the area but couldn't find him. They told me to stay with a friend or family member, that it wasn't safe for me to be alone. I spent the next few weeks bouncing between friends' couches, too afraid to go back to my apartment. The emails continued, taunting me, reminding me that he was always watching. Finally, I decided I couldn't live like that anymore. I packed up my belongings, broke my lease, and moved to a different city. I changed my name, got a new phone number, and tried to start over. It's been 2 years since then, and I haven't heard from him. But I still live with the fear that he'll find me again. I'm constantly looking over my shoulder, suspicious of strangers, afraid to trust anyone. This experience has changed me. I'm more cautious, more guarded. I'm hesitant to use dating apps, afraid of what I might find. I share this story not for sympathy, but as a warning. Online dating can be fun and exciting, but it can also be dangerous. Be careful who you trust. Be aware of the red flags, and never ignore your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Your safety and well-being are more important than finding love. I want to add a few things that I learned from all of this. Things I wish I had known before I ever swiped right on Daniel. Asterisk, trust your gut. This is the most important thing. If something feels off, even if you can't explain why, don't ignore it. Walk away. Asterisk, don't ignore red flags, jealousy, possessiveness, controlling behavior. These are all warning signs. Don't make excuses for them. Asterisk, be careful what you share. Don't give out too much personal information too soon. Protect your privacy. Asterisk, tell someone where you're going. When you go on a date, let a friend or family member know who you're meeting, where you're going, and when you expect to be back. Asterisk, meet in public places. Always meet your dates in public places, at least for the first few dates. Asterisk, don't be afraid to walk away. If you feel uncomfortable or unsafe, don't hesitate to leave. Your safety is paramount. Asterisk, document everything. If you're being harassed or threatened, keep a record of all communications. This will be helpful if you need to go to the police. Asterisk, seek support. If you're experiencing abuse or harassment, don't be afraid to reach out for help. There are people who care and want to support you. Online dating can be a great way to meet people, but it's important to be aware of the risks. Stay safe, be smart, and trust your instincts. Your life may depend on it. I hope my story helps someone somewhere avoid going through what I went through. The trauma still sticks with me to this day, and I don't want anyone else to have this horrible experience. Here's a longer, more detailed, and hopefully more disturbing story centered around Hinge, focusing on building tension and a growing sense of unease. I'd always been a bit cynical about dating apps. My friends swore by them, especially Hinge, claiming it was for people who actually wanted a relationship, whatever that meant. I was more of a meet-cute romantic at heart, picturing bumping into someone in a bookstore and sparks flying over shared literary interests. But after a particularly lonely Valentine's Day, I caved. Figure I had nothing to lose except maybe an hour scrolling through profiles and answering ridiculous prompts. Hinge was fine. A curated selection of guys holding fish, hiking mountains, or awkwardly posing with their dogs. The prompts were slightly more engaging than the usual Tinder fare, but still mostly surface level. I swiped selectively, liking a few profiles that seemed genuine and avoiding the obvious red flags, shirtless selfies, political rants, and anyone who listed fluent in sarcasm as a personality trait. Then I came across Ben's profile. He wasn't conventionally handsome, more like ruggedly interesting. A kind face, intelligent eyes, and a bio that actually made me laugh. He listed his biggest fear as disappointing David Attenborough, and his go-to karaoke song as Bohemian Rhapsody, which, let's be honest, takes guts. His photos were normal. One of him volunteering at an animal shelter, another of him with a group of friends at a brewery, and a slightly blurry one of him attempting to assemble IKEA furniture. He seemed normal, refreshingly so. I liked his profile, and within minutes, he liked me back. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. He asked thoughtful questions about my work, my hobbies, my family. He listened intently, remembered details, and followed up on things I'd mentioned days before. It was a level of engagement I wasn't used to, and it was nice. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet up. He suggested a coffee shop near my apartment, a low-key place with good pastries and even better people watching. I agreed, feeling a cautious optimism. I even wore my good jeans and spent an extra 10 minutes on my hair. The date went well. Ben was even more charming in person, witty and engaging, with a genuine warmth that put me at ease. We talked for hours about everything and nothing, laughing and sharing stories. There were no awkward silences, no forced conversations, just a natural connection that felt promising. We went on a few more dates over the next few weeks. Movies, museums, picnics in the park. Each time, I found myself liking him more and more. He was kind, considerate, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. He even remembered my coffee order. Things were progressing at a comfortable pace. We held hands, shared a few kisses, but nothing too intense. I appreciated his respect for boundaries and his willingness to take things slow. He was different from anyone I'd dated before, in a good way. Then things started to shift. Subtle things, almost imperceptible at first. He started asking more personal questions, probing deeper into my past, my insecurities, my fears. He wanted to know everything about my relationships, my childhood, my deepest secrets. At first, I brushed it off as him being genuinely interested, wanting to understand me on a deeper level. But the questions became more persistent, more insistent, until they started to feel invasive. He also started showing up unexpectedly. He just happened to be in the neighborhood and wanted to pop in and say hi. Or he'd leave little gifts on my doorstep, flowers, chocolates, a book I'd mentioned liking. It was sweet at first, but the frequency increased, and it started to feel overwhelming. I tried to talk to him about it, to gently suggest that maybe he was being a little too intense, but he'd always brush it off, saying he just cared about me so much and wanted to show me how he felt. He'd apologize profusely, promising to back off, but then the behavior would just start up again a few days later. The final straw was when he started mentioning things that I hadn't told him. Small details about my apartment, my schedule, my friends. Things that he couldn't possibly know unless he was watching me. One evening, after a particularly unsettling conversation, I decided to do some digging. I started with a simple Google search of his name. The first few results were innocuous enough. Social media profiles, a LinkedIn page, all confirming the information he'd given me. But then I stumbled upon a news article. The headline sent a chill down my spine. Local man arrested for stalking ex-girlfriend. The article detailed how Ben, whose real name was actually Benjamin Carter, had been arrested and charged with stalking his ex-girlfriend, Sarah Jenkins. He had reportedly harassed her relentlessly, followed her, and even broken into her apartment. The charges were eventually dropped due to a lack of evidence, but the article painted a disturbing picture of a man obsessed and potentially dangerous. I felt sick to my stomach. Everything clicked into place. The probing questions, the unexpected visits, the little gifts, the unnerving knowledge of my personal life. It all made sense. I immediately blocked him on Hinge and all other social media platforms. I changed my passwords, updated my security settings, and alerted my building management. I felt a wave of relief, thinking I'd finally put an end to it. But I was wrong. A few days later, I came home from work to find a note slipped under my door. It was handwritten in a neat, almost elegant script. I know you're scared. It read, but I would never hurt you. I just want to be with you. Please don't shut me out. I felt a surge of panic. He knew where I lived. He had found a way to contact me despite being blocked. He was still out there. I called the police and reported the note, showing them the news article about his previous arrest. They took the report seriously and promised to investigate. They advised me to stay with a friend or family member and to avoid being alone. I spent the next few weeks living in a state of constant anxiety. Every shadow, every sound, every unexpected phone call sent my heart racing. I jumped at every creak in the floorboards and checked under my bed every night before going to sleep. I felt like I was being watched, constantly scrutinized, my every move monitored. Then, one night, I came home to find my apartment door slightly ajar. My blood ran cold. I froze, paralyzed with fear, unsure of what to do. I debated calling the police, but I was afraid he was still inside, waiting for me. Slowly, cautiously, I pushed the door open and stepped inside. The apartment was dark and silent. The air was thick with a strange, unsettling stillness. I fumbled for the light switch and flipped it on. The room flooded with light, revealing nothing. Everything seemed to be in its place. Nothing was obviously out of order. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my racing heart. Maybe I had just imagined it. Maybe the door had been left ajar by mistake. I started to relax, to convince myself that I was overreacting. But then I saw it. On my living room wall, scrawled in large, bold letters, was a message. Not written in paint, not written in marker, but carved into the drywall with something sharp. It read, "I never felt unsafe until that moment when you lied to me." It wasn't the message itself that terrified me, although that was disturbing enough. It was the fact that he had been inside my apartment, that he had touched my walls, that he had left his mark on my sanctuary. But the true horror, the moment that will forever be etched in my memory, was what I saw next. Below the message, hanging on the wall, was a photograph. A photograph of me, taken through my window while I was sleeping. That's when the reality of the situation truly hit me. This wasn't just a harmless infatuation. This was a calculated act of terror, a deliberate attempt to control and manipulate me. I had no idea the extent of his obsession. I never felt unsafe until that moment when, staring at that picture, I realized how close he really was, and how utterly helpless I truly was. Okay, so picture this. Me, fresh out of a toxic relationship, convinced that dating apps were the devil, but also desperately lonely. My friends had been nagging me for months to get on Hinge, swearing it was different from Tinder and Bumble, more relationship-oriented. I rolled my eyes every time, picturing a wasteland of forced conversations and awkward coffee dates. But peer pressure and the gnawing fear of dying alone eventually got to me. I caved. I set up my profile, agonizing over which pictures to use and what witty prompts to answer. I even made my friends proofread my bio to make sure I didn't sound too jaded or desperate. I swiped with a healthy dose of skepticism, expecting the worst. And for the most part, I was right. The profiles were either painfully generic or trying way too hard. But then I came across Liam. Liam's profile was refreshing. His photos were natural, not overly posed or filtered. He had a genuine smile, and his prompts were funny and thoughtful. He seemed like the kind of guy who could hold a conversation without resorting to cheesy pickup lines or bragging about his job. I sent him a like with a comment about his favorite movie, hoping he'd reciprocate. To my surprise, he did. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed easily. We talked about our favorite books, our travel dreams, and our mutual love of bad puns. He seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me, and I found myself actually looking forward to his messages. It was nice. Almost too nice. After a few days of chatting, Liam suggested we meet up for coffee. I hesitated. I'd been burned before, and the idea of putting myself out there again terrified me. But he was so charming and persistent, and I was so tired of being alone, that I agreed. We met at a cute little cafe downtown. He was even more attractive in person, with kind eyes and a disarming smile. We talked for hours, and I felt like I could be myself around him. He listened intently, laughed at my jokes, and shared his own stories with genuine vulnerability. It felt like we had known each other for years. The date went so well that we made plans to see each other again the following weekend. We went to a concert, held hands, and even shared a sweet, tentative kiss at the end of the night. It was all very romantic and cliché, and I was completely smitten. Over the next few weeks, Liam and I became inseparable. We went on hikes, cooked dinner together, and spent countless hours cuddling on the couch watching movies. He met my friends, and they all loved him. He seemed like the perfect guy. I started to let my guard down, allowing myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I had finally found someone special. I hadn't felt this happy or hopeful in a long time. But as they say, if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. One evening, I was at Liam's apartment, waiting for him to get back from work. He had told me to make myself at home, so I was flipping through his record collection, trying to find something to play. I stumbled across a box tucked away in the corner, filled with old photos and letters. Curiosity got the better of me, and I started to look through them. The photos were of Liam with another woman. They looked happy in love. The letters were love letters, filled with intimate details and promises of forever. It quickly became clear that this was his ex-girlfriend. But what struck me was the date on the letters. They were recent, very recent. My heart sank. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I frantically searched for more clues, desperately hoping that I was mistaken. But the evidence was undeniable. Liam was still with his ex-girlfriend. He had been seeing me behind her back. I was furious, heartbroken, and completely blindsided. How could he do this to me? How could he pretend to care about me while lying to my face? I didn't know what to do. Just then, I heard the key turning in the door. Liam walked in, smiling, ready to greet me. I couldn't even look at him. "Hey, babe, how was your day?" he asked, oblivious to the turmoil raging inside me. I held up the photos and letters, my hands trembling. His face drained of color. What is this?" he stammered, trying to play dumb. "Don't even try to deny it," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "Who is she? And why are you still with her?" He tried to explain, to apologize, to make excuses. He said he was confused, that he didn't want to hurt either of us, that he was trying to figure things out. It was all bullshit. I didn't say a word. I just grabbed my things and walked out the door, tears streaming down my face. I spent the next few days and a days, replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out where I had gone wrong. How could I have been so blind? How could I have fallen for his lies? I confronted him via text, demanding an explanation. He admitted everything. He said he had been unhappy in his relationship for a while, but was afraid to break up with his ex-girlfriend because they had been together for so long. He said he saw me as an escape, a way to feel alive again. I was disgusted. I wasn't an escape. I was a person with feelings, and he had treated me like I was disposable. I blocked him on everything and tried to move on, but the experience left me scarred. I was once again jaded and distrustful. Dating apps seemed even more treacherous than before. It took me a long time to heal. I went to therapy, spent time with my friends and family, and focused on myself. I learned to recognize red flags and to trust my instincts. But the experience with Liam taught me a valuable lesson about Hinge and about dating in general. People can present a curated version of themselves online. It's easy to create a perfect profile, to say all the right things, to project an image of someone you're not. It's important to be cautious, to take things slow, and to pay attention to the subtle signs that something might be off. I learned a valuable lesson that day about trusting my gut and the importance of verifying information, even when someone seems perfect on paper. His profile seemed so genuine, his messages so thoughtful, his actions so caring. It was all a carefully constructed facade, designed to lure me in. I became more diligent in asking direct questions, seeking clarification on ambiguous statements, and doing my own research when something felt off. No more relying solely on a carefully crafted online persona. I now seek validation and look for consistency between someone's online presence and their real-life behavior. It's not about being paranoid, but about being realistic and protecting myself from potential heartbreak and deception. I'm still on Hinge, although I use it much more cautiously now. I'm more selective about who I match with, and I take my time getting to know people before meeting them in person. I'm no longer looking for the perfect guy. I'm looking for someone who is honest, genuine, and kind. Someone who is willing to be vulnerable and authentic, even when it's not easy. I know that those people are out there. I just have to be patient and keep searching. And this time, I'll trust my gut above all else. It started, like so many stories these days, with a dating app. Hinge, to be precise. You know, the one that brands itself as the dating app designed to be deleted. Looking back, that tagline feels like a cruel joke. It wasn't deleted. It just became a portal to something I can't quite explain, something that still claws at the edges of my sanity. I had been single for about a year after a particularly messy breakup. My friends kept nudging me to get back out there, to put myself on the market, as if I were some kind of discounted toaster oven. Hinge seemed like the least offensive option, less overtly hookup-centric than Tinder, less aggressively curated than Instagram. I filled out my profile with the usual carefully selected photos and witty prompts, hoping to attract someone who was also looking for something real, or at least, not completely vapid. I matched with Liam pretty quickly. His profile was intriguing. He had a sharp, intelligent face, and his prompts hinted at a love for obscure films and philosophical debates. He seemed different, and I was drawn to that. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He wasn't pushy or overly complimentary, just genuinely interested in getting to know me. He asked about my work, my hobbies, my fears, the kind of questions that actually revealed something about a person. After a week of messaging, we decided to meet for coffee. The date was perfect. He was even more charming in person, witty and engaging, with a smile that could melt glaciers. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing, and I felt a connection that I hadn't felt with anyone in a long time. We went on a second date, then a third. Each time, I found myself falling for him a little bit more. He seemed to genuinely care about me, about my thoughts and feelings. He listened intently when I spoke, remembered details about my life, and made me feel seen in a way that I hadn't experienced before. But there were oddities. Subtle at first, almost imperceptible. He was intensely private about his past. Whenever I asked about his family or childhood, he would brush it off with a vague answer and change the subject. He never posted anything on social media, and he seemed uncomfortable when I took photos of us together. He always had an excuse. Bad lighting, unflattering angle, didn't want to be tracked. I chalked it up to him being a bit of a recluse, a private person who valued his anonymity. I'm a fairly private person too, so I understood. Naive, right? There was also the dreams. Vivid, unsettling dreams that started shortly after we began dating. I would dream of being in a dark, labyrinthine house, chased by shadowy figures. Liam was always there in the periphery, watching me with an unreadable expression on his face. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, feeling a sense of dread that lingered throughout the day. I didn't tell Liam about the dreams. I didn't want to seem crazy or overly emotional, but the dreams persisted, growing more intense and disturbing with each passing night. Then came the gifts. Small, seemingly innocuous gifts that he would give me seemingly at random. A vintage music box, antique silver locket, a first edition copy of my favorite book. They were thoughtful and romantic, but they also felt off, like they were chosen for some reason I couldn't understand. I'm not a materialistic person. I didn't like receiving gifts that were so expensive. It made me uncomfortable. One day, he gave me an antique mirror, claiming he found it at a flea market and thought I would like it. It was beautiful, with an ornate frame and a slightly tarnished surface. But when I looked into it, I didn't see my reflection. I saw a different woman, older and with sadness in her eyes. The image flickered, and then my own reflection returned. I told myself it was just a trick of the light, a figment of my imagination, but the feeling of unease persisted. One evening, while I was at his apartment, I decided to do something I knew I shouldn't. He stepped out for a smoke break, and I went through his drawers. I knew it was wrong, a violation of his privacy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that he was hiding something from me. In his bedside table, I found a locked box. I hesitated for a moment, then grabbed a hairpin from my purse and managed to pick the lock. Inside the box, I found a stack of old photographs. They were photographs of me. Not recent photos, but photos from years ago, from different stages of my life. Photos I had completely forgotten about. Photos from my high school graduation, from my first job, from a trip I took with my family when I was a child. Photos that Liam couldn't possibly have had unless he had been watching me. I was shocked, confused, and terrified. Just then, I heard Liam returning. I quickly shoved the photos back into the box, locked it, and replaced it in the drawer. I tried to act casual, as if nothing had happened, but I could feel his eyes on me. He knew. That night, the atmosphere in his apartment shifted. The warmth and affection were gone, replaced by a cold, unsettling stillness. He was watching me, studying me, his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "Is something wrong?" I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his silence more terrifying than any words could have been. I knew I had to get out of there. I made some excuse about having to go home early, and he didn't try to stop me. As I walked out the door, I felt his eyes on my back, burning into me. I didn't sleep that night. I stayed up all night, huddled in my apartment, every creak and shadow sending shivers down my spine. I knew I couldn't stay there. I had to get away from him. I blocked Liam's number, blocked him on social media, and deactivated my Hinge profile. I packed a bag and drove to my sister's house, a few hours away. I told her everything, and she was horrified. She convinced me to go to the police. The police were initially skeptical. They said I didn't have any concrete evidence, just suspicions and a collection of old photos. But they agreed to look into it. They ran a background check on Liam, and what they found was chilling. Liam wasn't his real name. He had a history of stalking and harassment. He had been arrested several times for violating restraining orders. He had a pattern of targeting women who resembled his ex-girlfriend, who had left him years ago. I was terrified. I realized that I had stumbled into something far more dangerous than I could have ever imagined. The police put me under protection and started investigating Liam more seriously. They tracked him down to his apartment, but he was gone. He had vanished without a trace. I spent the next few months living in constant fear, looking over my shoulder, jumping at every sound. I moved to a new city, changed my name, and tried to start over. But the memory of Liam, of his charm and his secrets, still haunts me. I still have the nightmares. I still see his face in crowds. I know he's still out there, somewhere, watching me. And that's the most terrifying thing of all. I haven't used dating apps since that incident. The idea of opening myself up to someone new, of trusting someone again, is too much to bear. Hinge didn't help me find love. It almost cost me my life. And that's why I'll never forget the night I swiped right on Liam. It was the night my life changed forever. I should have trusted my intuition. Intuition is something I have now. It's been years since all of that happened. I still have moments where I feel like he's watching me. I've been in therapy for a long time now, and it has helped. There are still moments when my heart races, and I feel like I will be sick. I still look over my shoulder. It's something I don't think I'll ever completely shake off. But I'm alive, and I'm learning to live again, even with the weight of what happened. It's a heavy burden, but it's mine. I carry it with me. A reminder of the darkness that exists in the world and the importance of trusting your instincts. The most important thing I have learned is to always trust myself. It is one of the only things that got me through this and keeps me going. The story hasn't stopped me. It's just made me a lot more cautious. To this day, I still get chills thinking about it. It wasn't the ghost story kind of chill, or the kind you get from a sudden drop in temperature. It was a bone-deep dread, a primal fear that settled in my marrow and refuses to leave. It all started innocently enough, like most bad decisions do, with a dating app. Hinge, to be exact. I had recently moved to a new city for work, and honestly, my social life was non-existent. My colleagues were nice enough, but most of them were either married with kids or just not my type. So, I did what any lonely millennial would do. I downloaded a dating app. I tried Tinder and Bumble before, but they always felt too superficial. Hinge, with its emphasis on prompts and shared interests, seemed like it might lead to something more substantial. I meticulously crafted my profile, choosing pictures that were flattering but not overly posed, and answering the prompts with a mix of wit and vulnerability. I swiped with cautious optimism, hoping to find someone who shared my love for hiking, indie movies, and obscure historical trivia. Then I matched with him. His name was Alex, and his profile was intriguing. His pictures were a mix of travel shots and candid moments with friends. He seemed outdoorsy, intelligent, and genuinely kind. His prompts were thoughtful and well-written, and we seemed to have a lot in common. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. He was funny, engaging, and surprisingly insightful. He asked about my move to the city, my work, and my passions. He listened intently and offered thoughtful responses. It felt like we'd known each other for years. After a few days of chatting, he suggested we meet up for coffee. I hesitated. I was still relatively new to the city, and the thought of meeting a stranger in a new place made me a little nervous. But Alex was so charming and persuasive that I couldn't resist. We agreed to meet at a local coffee shop on a Saturday afternoon. The day of the date, I was a nervous wreck. I spent hours agonizing over what to wear, rereading our conversations, and trying to calm my racing heart. I arrived at the coffee shop a few minutes early and scanned the crowd, trying to spot Alex. And then I saw him. He was even more attractive in person than in his pictures. He had kind eyes, a warm smile, and an easygoing demeanor. He walked over to me, and we exchanged a hug that felt surprisingly comfortable. We ordered our coffees and sat down at a small table near the window. The conversation flowed as easily as it had online. We talked about our interests, our goals, and our dreams. He told me about his work as a software engineer, his passion for photography, and his love for hiking in the nearby mountains. I told him about my work in marketing, my love for books, and my desire to explore the city. He listened intently, his eyes never leaving mine. After a couple of hours, he suggested we take a walk in the park. It was a beautiful day, and the park was bustling with people enjoying the sunshine. We strolled along the winding paths, talking and laughing. He seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. He even held my hand, a gesture that felt surprisingly natural. As the sun began to set, he suggested we grab dinner at a nearby restaurant. I agreed, feeling a sense of excitement and anticipation. The restaurant was cozy and intimate, with soft lighting and candles on the tables. We ordered a bottle of wine and shared a delicious meal. The conversation continued to flow, and I found myself feeling more comfortable and relaxed than I had in months. After dinner, he walked me back to my apartment. As we stood outside my door, he turned to me, his eyes filled with warmth and affection. He leaned in and kissed me, a kiss that was both gentle and passionate. I kissed him back, feeling a surge of electricity coursing through my body. We said goodnight, and I went inside, feeling giddy and hopeful. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of dates and romantic gestures. Alex took me to museums, concerts, and hiking trails. He cooked me dinner, wrote me poems, and showered me with compliments. He seemed perfect, too good to be true. And maybe that's where I messed up, believing something that was impossible. But as time went on, I started noticing some strange things. He was always vague about his past, avoiding any specific details about his family or his childhood. He always seemed to know where I was, even when I hadn't told him. He would show up at my favorite coffee shop, or bump into me at the grocery store. It felt like he was always watching me. And then there were the phone calls. I would wake up in the middle of the night to find my phone ringing, with Alex's name flashing on the screen. When I answered, there would be nothing but silence on the other end. He would always deny calling, claiming that he had been asleep. I tried to brush off these strange occurrences, telling myself that I was just being paranoid. But the feeling of unease continued to grow. I started to feel like I was being watched, not in a romantic way, but in a sinister way. I couldn't shake the feeling that Alex was hiding something from me. One day, I decided to do some investigating. I started by searching for him online. I scoured social media, looking for any trace of his past. But I found nothing. It was like he didn't exist before he met me. No Facebook, no Instagram, no LinkedIn. Nothing. I started to panic. Who was this man I had been spending so much time with? What was he hiding? I decided to confront him. I called him and asked him to meet me at the coffee shop where we had our first date. When he arrived, I cut right to the chase. I told him that I had been doing some research and that I couldn't find any trace of his past. I asked him who he really was. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of sadness and fear. He took a deep breath and began to speak. He told me that he had been living a lie. He wasn't a software engineer. He wasn't a photographer. He was a con artist. He had been using dating apps to find vulnerable women, and then he would manipulate them, steal their money, and disappear. He told me that he had chosen me because I seemed lonely and vulnerable. He had been studying me for weeks, learning my habits, my routines, my weaknesses. He had been waiting for the right moment to strike. I was stunned. I couldn't believe that I had been so naive, so trusting. I had fallen for his lies, his charm, his manipulation. I had almost become another victim. I stood up and walked away, feeling a mix of anger, betrayal, and relief. I never saw Alex again. I reported him to the police, but they were never able to find him. He had vanished without a trace, leaving me with nothing but a broken heart and a lingering sense of fear. To this day, I still get chills thinking about it. Not because of what happened, but because of what almost happened. I had been so close to becoming a victim, and the thought of what could have been still haunts me. I am much more cautious to this day. I do not trust dating apps. I downloaded Hinge because, honestly, I was bored. My friends were all partnered up, constantly posting cute couple pics and talking about weekend getaways. Meanwhile, I was spending my Friday nights microwaving ramen and binge-watching true crime documentaries. Hinge seemed like the lesser of all the dating app evils. Less superficial than Tinder, less commitment-y than Bumble. Designed to be deleted, they claimed. Famous last words. My profile was pretty standard. A few decent photos, one hiking, one at a concert, carefully cropped to exclude the ex-boyfriend lurking in the background, and one slightly blurry selfie taken in good lighting. My prompts were witty enough, I thought. Something about loving spicy food and hating small talk. The usual dating app cliches. But hey, they worked. That's how I met Ethan. His profile was intriguing. He had a captivating smile. His photos were well composed, like he knew how to work the camera. One showed him volunteering at an animal shelter, another rock climbing, and a third, more candid shot of him laughing with friends at a bar. His prompts were thoughtful and a little bit quirky. He wrote about his love for vintage bookstores, his fascination with astronomy, and his dream of one day living in a secluded cabin in the woods. We matched almost instantly. Our conversations flowed easily. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything, our favorite books, our childhood memories, our hopes and fears. He seemed normal, refreshingly so. After a week of chatting, we decided to meet up for coffee. I was nervous, but also excited. He seemed too good to be true, but I was willing to take the chance. The coffee date was perfect. He was even more attractive in person, and his personality was just as charming as it had been online. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. There was an undeniable spark between us. We started seeing each other regularly. Dates turned into dinners. Dinners turned into movies at his place, and movies at his place eventually turned into, well, you know. Everything felt natural and easy. I was falling hard. He had a cool apartment, lots of plants and natural light. He had an eye for interior design, and the place had this warm, inviting vibe. He said he was a freelance graphic designer. He worked from home most days, which was convenient for our spontaneous lunches and mid-afternoon cuddles. He was considerate and attentive. He remembered the small details, my favorite flower, the type of coffee I liked, the name of my childhood pet. He always listened when I talked, and he made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. I introduced him to my friends, and they loved him. My mom even approved, which was a huge deal. Everything was going so well, it felt surreal. Then, things started to get weird. It started subtly. Small things that I initially brushed off as quirks or coincidences. He started asking me about my schedule, not in a controlling way, but more like he was trying to plan things around my availability. He'd ask about my work meetings, my gym classes, my weekend plans. I didn't think much of it at first, but it started to feel a little excessive. Then there were the little gifts. He'd leave them at my apartment when I wasn't there. A book I'd mentioned wanting to read, a scented candle that matched my favorite perfume, a handmade bracelet with my initials engraved on it. They were thoughtful gestures, but they also felt a little intense. He started showing up at places I hadn't told him I'd be. Once, I was grabbing lunch with a friend at a cafe near my office, and he just happened to be there, working on his laptop. Another time, I was at a yoga class, and he was in the lobby, waiting for me when I got out. He always had an explanation. I was in the neighborhood, or I just wanted to surprise you. But it started to feel like he was keeping tabs on me. Then came the questions about my past. He'd ask about my ex-boyfriends, my past relationships, my biggest regrets. He'd probe and pry, trying to get me to reveal every detail. It felt like he was trying to piece together my life story, like he was trying to understand me on a deeper level. But it also felt invasive and uncomfortable. One night, I was scrolling through Instagram, and I saw a photo of Ethan at a party. It was a group photo, and he was standing next to a woman I didn't recognize. They were smiling and laughing, and they looked close. I confronted him about it. He said she was just a friend from college, nothing to worry about. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was hiding something. I started to feel like I was being watched. I'd catch glimpses of him in unexpected places, driving past my apartment, walking down my street, sitting in his car across from my office. Every time I confronted him, he'd deny it, saying I was being paranoid. One day, I came home from work to find my apartment door unlocked. I was terrified. I ran inside, checking every room, but nothing seemed to be missing, except my laptop was gone. I called the police, but they said there wasn't much they could do without any evidence. I told them I suspected Ethan, but they said they couldn't investigate without proof. I confronted him again, but he denied everything. He said I was being delusional, that I was making things up. He said he loved me, that he would never do anything to hurt me. I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't. The signs were too obvious. He was lying. I started to distance myself from him. I stopped answering his calls. I avoided his texts. I made excuses to avoid seeing him. He became increasingly desperate, showing up at my apartment unannounced, begging me to talk to him. One night, I was walking home from a friend's house when I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around, and it was Ethan. He looked different. His eyes were wild. His hair was disheveled, and he was breathing heavily. He grabbed my arm, his grip tight. "I just want to talk," he said, his voice strained. "Leave me alone, Ethan," I said, trying to pull away. "I love you," he said, his eyes pleading. "Why can't you see that?" "You're scaring me," I said, my voice trembling. "I just want us to be together," he said, his grip tightening. "Forever." I managed to break free and ran. I didn't stop running until I reached my apartment building. I locked the door behind me and collapsed against it, sobbing. I called the police again, but they said they couldn't do anything unless he physically harmed me. I felt trapped and helpless. I knew I had to get away. I packed a bag, grabbed my passport and credit cards, and left my apartment. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I just needed to disappear. I spent the next few weeks bouncing between hotels and motels, constantly looking over my shoulder. I changed my phone number, deleted my social media accounts, and tried to erase all traces of my existence. I eventually ended up in a small town in the middle of nowhere. I found a job as a waitress at a local diner and rented a tiny apartment above a bakery. I tried to start over, to forget about Ethan, to move on with my life. But he was always there, lurking in the back of my mind. Every time I saw a stranger, I wondered if it was him. Every time the phone rang, I feared it was him. I knew he wouldn't give up. He was obsessed with me. He was determined to have me, no matter what it took. I started having nightmares. I would wake up in a cold sweat, convinced that he was in the room with me. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I couldn't function. I knew I couldn't live like this forever. I had to do something. I decided to go back, to confront him, to put an end to this nightmare once and for all. I knew it was risky, but I couldn't live in fear any longer. I had to take control of my life. I returned to my old apartment, armed with a can of pepper spray and a plan. I waited for him, knowing he would eventually show up. And he did. He appeared at my door, his face pale and gaunt. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "I knew you'd come back," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm not afraid of you anymore, Ethan," I said, my voice steady. "I just want to be with you," he said, his eyes pleading. "You're sick, Ethan," I said. "You need help." He lunged at me, but I was ready. I sprayed him in the face with the pepper spray and ran. I ran to the police station and told them everything. This time they listened. They arrested Ethan and charged him with stalking, harassment, and burglary. He's in jail now, awaiting trial. I don't know what will happen to him, but I hope he gets the help he needs. I'm still recovering from the trauma, but I'm slowly starting to heal. I'm seeing a therapist, and I'm surrounded by supportive friends and family. I'll never use a dating app again. The experience with Ethan has scarred me for life, but I'm not going to let him ruin my life. I'm going to move on, to find happiness, to live without fear. I survived, and that's all that matters. Okay, listen, I need to tell someone about this, because I still can't fully wrap my head around it. I've always been a bit of a Hinge skeptic, honestly. I'm more of a meet people in real life kind of person, but after a particularly dry spell and some relentless nagging from my friends, I decided to give it a shot. I set up my profile, answered the prompts with what I thought was a good mix of humor and genuineness, and started swiping. It was mostly the usual Hinge experience, awkward small talk, guys who seemed way more interested in their gym routine than actual conversation, and the occasional decent connection that fizzled out after a week. Nothing earth-shattering, Until I matched with Liam. Liam's profile was different. He wasn't conventionally handsome, more like ruggedly interesting. His photos showed him hiking, playing guitar around a campfire, and one that looked like he was volunteering at an animal shelter. His prompts were thoughtful and funny, and he seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We started chatting, and the conversation flowed effortlessly. We talked about everything: our families, our dreams, our fears, our favorite books and movies. He was intelligent, witty, and surprisingly vulnerable. It felt like I'd known him for years, even though we'd only been talking for a few days. After a week of nonstop texting, he suggested we meet up. I was hesitant, as I normally am, but there was something about him that felt safe. He suggested a small coffee shop near my apartment, somewhere public and low-key. I agreed. The date was amazing. He was even more charming in person than he was online. We talked for hours, laughing and sharing stories. He listened intently when I spoke, making me feel like I was the only person in the room. We had so much in common. It was almost uncanny. By the end of the night, I was completely smitten. We started seeing each other regularly. Every date felt like a dream. He took me to art museums, cooked me dinner, and even wrote me a song. He was everything I'd ever wanted in a partner: kind, compassionate, and genuinely interested in me. My friends were ecstatic. They said they'd never seen me so happy. But then, things started to get weird. It started subtly. He'd ask me strange questions about my past, things that felt a little too personal, too soon. He'd want to know details about my childhood, my past relationships, my deepest insecurities. At first, I brushed it off as him just being curious, wanted to get to know me better. But the questions kept coming, becoming more and more probing. Then there were the coincidences. He'd show up at places I frequented, seemingly by chance. He'd mention things I'd only told him in passing, things I didn't think he'd remember. It felt like he was always watching me, even when we weren't together. I started feeling uneasy, like I was being observed. I tried to rationalize it, told myself I was being paranoid, but the feeling wouldn't go away. One night, I was scrolling through Instagram when I saw a photo that stopped me dead in my tracks. It was a picture of Liam, but not the Liam I knew. This Liam had a different hairstyle, different clothes, and a completely different expression on his face. He looked cold, distant, almost menacing. The photo was tagged in a city hundreds of miles away, a city I knew he'd never mentioned visiting. I clicked on the profile, and my blood ran cold. It was a profile dedicated to Liam, filled with photos and videos of him doing ordinary things: walking down the street, sitting in a park, buying groceries. It was like someone was documenting his every move. I scrolled further down, and that is when I found the picture of myself. It was a candid shot, taken without my knowledge, of me walking into my apartment building. The caption read, "Target acquired." I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I knew, with chilling certainty, that something was very, very wrong. I tried to call Liam, but his phone went straight to voicemail. I texted him, but he didn't respond. I felt a surge of panic rising in my chest. I decided to do some digging. I searched his name online, and that is when I found the articles. Liam wasn't his real name. His real name was Daniel, and he had a long history of stalking and harassing women. He'd been arrested multiple times for violating restraining orders, and there were even rumors of him being involved in a missing person case. My heart was pounding in my chest. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I was dating a stalker, a potentially dangerous man, and I had no idea. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and ran out of my apartment. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get away from him. I drove to my friend Sarah's house, sobbing uncontrollably. I told her everything, and she was horrified. She called the police, and they took my statement. They told me that Daniel had a history of using fake profiles on dating apps to lure women in, and that I was lucky to have discovered his true identity before things escalated further. The police issued a warrant for his arrest, but he was nowhere to be found. It turned out he'd been using a fake address, a fake phone number, and a stolen identity. He was a ghost, impossible to track down. I spent the next few weeks living in fear, constantly looking over my shoulder. I changed my locks, installed a security system, and started carrying pepper spray. I was terrified that he would find me, that he would hurt me. The police eventually caught him a few months later, in another state, using another fake identity. He was arrested and charged with stalking and harassment. I testified against him in court, and he was sentenced to several years in prison. Even though he's behind bars, I still can't shake the feeling of unease. I still have nightmares about him, about his cold, calculating eyes. I still feel like he's watching me, even when I know he's not. This experience has changed me. I'm more cautious now, more suspicious of people I meet online. I'm more aware of the dangers that lurk in the digital world, the predators who use dating apps to prey on vulnerable women. I'm sharing my story to warn others, to urge you to be careful when using dating apps. Don't trust anyone too quickly. Do your research. Look for red flags. And if something feels off, trust your gut. It could save your life. Here's some things I wish I had done differently. Asterisk reverse image searches photos. Asterisk I was so caught up in the connection we had that I didn't even think to check if his photos were real. Asterisk be more skeptical. Asterisk I was too eager to believe that I found the perfect guy, and I ignored the warning signs. Asterisk tell someone sooner. Asterisk I kept my concerns to myself for too long, and that made me more vulnerable. Asterisk share less personal information. Asterisk I revealed too much about myself too quickly, giving him ammunition to use against me. Asterisk trust my instincts. Asterisk I had a feeling that something was wrong, but I ignored it. Please learn from our mistakes. Be careful out there. The digital world can be a dangerous place. Protect yourself, and don't let my story become your own. Trust me, Hinge isn't worth this. There's always a risk involved when meeting anyone online. There are always dangerous people. Be aware of what you are doing and who you are talking to. No relationship is worth putting your life at risk. Please don't become another statistic. Protect yourself. I don't think I'll ever fully recover from what happened. I am scared of people, and that feeling won't go away. I want you to stay safe. I wish everyone the best.